Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamie Haberl, and I am the Executive Director at the Iowa Healthiest State Initiative, and I'm thrilled to have you joining us here today for the Make It Okay Midweek Series. We are thrilled to be partnering with the Make It Okay Linn County Committee as well as MedQuarter on this webinar series. So just a few comments that I want to make before I turn it over to today's moderator, Carol. So Make It Okay is a campaign under the Iowa Healthiest State Initiative, and we are working to reduce the stigma of mental illness across the state of Iowa. And this is one of many ways that we're doing it. So we're thrilled to have you with us today. All of your microphones will be muted today just to keep our background noise to a minimum. And there are a couple of different ways that you can set up your Zoom screen. So you can go to the upper right-hand corner and you should be able to pick from your view options, either gallery or speaker. I encourage you to put it on speaker so that you can see our panelists that are with us today, as well as the PowerPoint presentation that we have. If you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function, and myself and Carol will be watching that to make sure that we answer any questions either when they come up or at the end, depending on our timing of those questions. Also, today's session is being recorded, and a copy of that will be available for later viewing or to share with others. You will be receiving an email later today on how you can access the recording from today's session as well. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our great moderator, Carol, to kick us off for today's session. Carol, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate having all of you here today for our midweek session on medical, psychological, and spiritual first aid. And I'm going to go over just a few slides introducing you to the Make It Okay campaign if you are not already familiar with it. Sometimes there's a lag between my click and when it goes, so there we go. So Make It Okay is a community campaign to reduce stigma by starting conversations and increasing understanding about mental illness. We take a learn, talk, share approach. So I am really excited to have all of you on today to really be focusing on learning, on the impact of stigma, and a little bit about how you can make some changes in your own lives and how you talk and share with other people. Mental illness is a medical illness. It's important that we know it's not a character flaw. There's a lot of environmental and genetics that make up mental illnesses, and they are biological in nature. So reducing the stigma around it is extremely important in the work that we're doing. This certainly is not an exhaustive list of common symptoms of mental illness, but this is a few, and I encourage you to read through these and think about things that you may be seeing in family members or loved ones, but certainly these are not everything out there, and with different diagnoses and different individuals, it's going to look differently. Of course, we really want to make sure people realize that mental illnesses are treatable and life does get better. Some people over time, in some of my work, I've heard people talk about not wanting to go on medication because of their concerns about the side effects and that sort of thing. And that's always a personal decision, but it's also important to remember that taking medication is not a sign of weakness. And that just like if you're diabetic, you may need insulin, sometimes medication is needed and necessary for mental illness as well. Of course, therapy and diet and exercise and having a really good support network is also really important when we're talking about recovery. So you may be thinking, how can I support someone who I live with and love who has a mental illness? And part of it is just to be open and talk with them, have conversations, and don't be afraid to open the door and keep the conversation moving. You know, the phrase "be nice" is one that I use frequently. When my children were little, I always used that with them, but I think while that seems basic, that's in this world of sort of incivility that we live in, I think that's probably one of the most important things that we can do is just be nice to each other, be respectful, listen, and really listen for content, listen for how you can help. And don't ignore and don't shy away if people want to share some information with you about their illness. And then offer to help, just like you would offer to help if someone had a family member in the hospital, or maybe you would take them a meal or offer to take someone to an appointment. Do the same thing for someone who's experiencing a mental illness. Just a few tips on what to say and what not to say. Again, I think some of this falls under the umbrella of be nice. And sometimes we say things out of because we're uncomfortable or we're nervous around talking about mental illness. And so I just encourage you to think about some of those cliches that we often use and think about whether they're respectful. And would you say that to someone who had a recent diagnosis of cancer or heart disease? And if you wouldn't say it for that, probably it's not a good idea to say it for someone who's working through a mental illness. And basically those things to say are really asking how you can help. How can I be there for you? And opening the door to allow someone to talk and share. You know, often when we have conversations like this, it can stir up feelings or emotions in yourself. And so we want to make sure that you are aware of where you can go for help, whether it's in a crisis, and the National Suicide Hotline and our own Foundation 2 crisis line are two very important places to go. The Warm Line and Your Life Iowa are other resources that you can access to seek assistance. We're fortunate in this community to have many, many local resources, and this also is certainly not an exhaustive list. These are some of our key stakeholders in our community though, and together we form a really nice network. We're very fortunate in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City corridor area to have some wonderful resources. And NAMI Linn County is a fabulous resource for all of us for information and resources and advocacy opportunities. So certainly check out their website. Without further ado, I try not to spend too much time on the beginning stuff because I know the reason you are all here is for our panelists today and our discussion about medical, psychological, and spiritual first aid. We are extremely fortunate today to have four very brilliant panelists, and I'm going to go through the introductions and then we'll jump right into our panel discussion. So first of all, Dr. Jennifer Donovan was born in Washington, D.C., but grew up in Stanwood, Iowa, a small town just outside of Cedar Rapids. She enjoyed 4 years in Decorah, Iowa, where she majored in athletic training and graduated from Luther College in 2006, a college that produced some really great graduates, and I'm fortunate to be one of them. She spent the next years of her life in Iowa City, solidifying her love for the Hawkeyes while attending the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine, and then completing her family medicine and psychiatry residency at the University of Iowa. She's board certified in both family medicine and psychiatry, and from 2015 to 2020, she was a core faculty member at the Cedar Rapids Medical Education Foundation. She was selected in 2019 for the Corridor Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award for her collaboration with Eastern Iowa Health Center and other community partners to enhance access to mental health care and medication-assisted treatment for people with substance use disorders. Since the closure of the Cedar Rapids Medical Education Foundation in the summer of 2020, she has been a psychiatrist at the Abbey Community Mental Health Center and is working on projects to integrate addiction treatments, primary care, and psychiatry. Adrian Corbacus joined Foundation 2 as a Mobile Crisis Outreach Program Manager in 2019. She strives to develop and lead crisis intervention programming that provides trauma-informed, evidence-based, and strength-centered services to all individuals through Mobile Crisis Outreach Program. She's especially passionate about working with marginalized, underserved, and justice-involved populations. Steve Miller is a NAMI board member. And Steve got sick at the age of 19 and was diagnosed with mental health issues. He'd been sick for 17 years until new medication came out that miraculously worked. Steve has been in recovery for 20 years now, and currently Steve is an author, a speaker, and in his free time, a drawer. Dr. Brian Pingle enjoys helping others discover and live out their purpose. And I'm sorry, I'm fumbling this introduction. Helping others discover and live out their purpose has been a life calling for Dr. Pingle. Before moving to Cedar Rapids, he was a professor of youth and urban development for 10 years and focused his dissertation on helping parents who have children with mental disorders. As the lead pastor at Cedar Rapids First Assembly, he has worked to create a culture where people experience personal freedom as they learn that it's okay not to be okay. So today our panelists are going to discuss ways of promoting a healthy brain, taking good care of yourself and others with mental illness, and providing helpful tools and resources for family and friends. Tips are going to be provided about what questions to ask for help, when to intervene, and where to go for help. So we're going to start by taking a closer look at optimum brain health. A healthy brain plays a crucial role in mental health. Brain health enables thought, planned action, and emotional connections that impact the daily lives and progress of individuals, families, and communities. So my first question is for Dr. Donovan. Dr. Donovan, if you could just tell us what makes for optimal brain health in the long run.
That's a really great question, and there are a lot of different things for each person that can help optimize their brain health. The brain is an organ just like any other organ of our body, so generally having good health, being physically active, having a good healthy diet, lots of fruits and vegetables can also be really important to brain health, making sure you're getting screened for high cholesterol and diabetes, and taking care of chronic health conditions can also promote good brain health. Limiting substances in your life that are less healthy. So any of the illicit substances here or in the state, or smoking and alcohol, limiting those and keeping those in moderation can also improve brain health in a number of ways. This last year has been very interesting to kind of look at not only like the physical things that can help brain health, but also the emotional things and the spiritual things that can help brain health. And as a mental health provider, the past couple of weeks, it's been very prominent that people are getting fatigued after 7, 8, 9 months of limited contact with other people, or having to do things differently, or making ways to have those family traditions in different ways. And, the importance of social interaction to our brain health and our overall physical health is become more and more prominent. So those would kind of be the things I would say would be keeping good overall health. So including healthy diet, exercise, activity, getting some sunlight every day, whether it's a light box or, just getting outside to go to the mailbox every day. Sometimes that's a big outing these days. But having those times to connect with nature, having those times to connect with people that are important to you in your life, having time to connect with the activities that are important with you in your life, even if it's different. You may not be able to go hiking at the Palisades, which is what the picture behind me is from, but finding ways to reconnect with nature if that's something that's important to you, finding ways to reconnect with your spiritual community. If spirituality is something important to you, making sure you're finding ways to connect with people and your faith-based organizations, and kind of looking at the whole you, not just the physical you too.
Thank you for that. As a follow-up to the entire panel, I wonder, given the stressful times that we're living in, as you alluded to, Dr. Donovan, with the pandemic and our derecho here in our community, and then of course our challenging political and season that we're living through. What are some things that we can do to maintain health or perform basic first aid in these stressful times?
For me, I think one of the things is giving yourself some grace, giving yourself the space to feel whatever emotion you need to feel and letting that be okay. Giving yourself the grace to say, I'm, not going to, if I had all these high goals, I'm maybe not going to achieve everything that I wanted to achieve this year. I may not be able to travel to those places that I wanted to travel to, or I may not be able to physically see the people that I wanted to physically see, but making arrangements to do that in a socially distanced or safe way, so maybe, if sitting on Santa Claus is something you always go and do every year, maybe you can't go to see Santa this year, but maybe you can do a telephone call and have a friend pretend to be Santa for your kids, if that's something something that, just finding ways to find those meaningful things in your life and kind of figuring out what's most important to you in life, and making time for that, kind of reassessing things in life. And if those things aren't, the things that you're spending a lot of time with, if those are not the most important things to you, are those things you can take off your plate? Are those things that you can get less prominent in your life? And sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't be. Vacuuming is not one of my favorite things to do, but it's something that I need to do to keep my house healthy. And like, if I could get rid of my vacuum cleaner, like, that does not bring me joy. But having a house where I feel comfortable in, that I can have a decluttered space. A lot of times when people have mental health conditions, as the mental health kind of gets more cluttered in your head, your physical space also gets more cluttered. And so finding ways to declutter, or even if it's just, maybe I just do 10 dishes today, not my whole pack of dishes, or my whole sink of dishes. Like, even making those little steps can end up to be big steps, and kind of giving your grace to say, okay, I may not be able to do all the dishes today, but by golly, I can do these 3.
I love it. Thank you.
Yourself the space to do that.
I love the idea of grace. Does anybody else want to chime in on what we can do to maintain our personal health?
I think also looking for the opportunities to practice gratitude can be very fulfilling for people, for trying to find those little things that you're grateful for in your life, even though sometimes it feels really overwhelming and like everything is going wrong. Most people can find those little pockets to focus on and reflect in. And so I would definitely encourage people to spend a little bit of time every day, either journaling about it or thinking about it or talking about it with a loved one, to just take stock of what maybe is going right for us in 2020.
I love it. Brian, did you have something you wanted to add there too?
I just thought I love the concept of grace and gratitude. Those are absolutely critical. I also think, just like it's important to what we feed ourselves physically, what we're feeding ourselves mentally during this time is really important. With all the things that are happening, news, and it's amazing how many people are just getting caught up into things that are perpetuating the level of anxiety and stress. And we need to be careful what it is that we're taking that time, that we're doing things that we enjoy, that we're making some other really specific and intentional choices. Our emotions are real. We can't ever deny them, but they're not really good guides. And so if our emotions tell us we should keep eating something, even if it's what we're putting in front of us and listening to, doesn't necessarily mean that's the right guide for us to listen to during these times.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I respond? So Rebecca
Absolutely.
had made a comment. The question was, how do we help someone with erroneous self-talk? And I think that's, especially as this year is, a lot of people's anxieties are just, rising and rising and rising. And if you're hearing some of those concerning behaviors, sometimes asking the person, like, what evidence do you have that that's the truth? Like, what evidence, like if somebody feels like it's the worst ever, what's the evidence that you have it's the worst ever? What's the evidence that it may not be the worst ever? And using some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques in our regular everyday life to kind of reframe things in a way that may be a more helpful and healthier way to look at things.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great answer to that question. Okay, I'm going to turn to Steve now, and I'd like to ask Steve, what are some signs or symptoms that you pay attention to, and that maybe we as loved ones can be paying attention to, that tell you it's time for you to maybe think about getting some help, or some special attention.
Yes, and first I'd like to say it's good to see some friends out there. We have a nice crowd. I see Michelle, I see Jan. Good to see you guys. Anyways, my talk today, they wanted me to talk about signs and symptoms. So I'm going to kind of interweave that with my personal story. And like I said, I got like 4 minutes. I'll try to condense it the best I can, and we can do a little discussion after this. Anyways, the first time I ever noticed mental health, I was like 8, 9 years old. I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. I was in my parents' basement looking out the small window. I says, you know what? Someday there's going to be something severe with me. My way of dealing with it at that time was just force myself outside, get physical, and not think about it. And that's what I did. And I was a pretty good athlete, pretty good academics. I like music, so I was kind of diverse. But then, so I was playing baseball, and the first time I noticed it when I was athletic was but my last at bat, my sophomore year. I was a second baseman, and I was unbearably nervous and anxious. And that was the first time I ever felt it affect me. So I muddled through, got through the high school, and I went down to Kirksville. And that year, yeah, I was starting to notice symptoms. Things were getting worse. It's hard to describe what it was. Only thing I can say is it's kind of like the strangest Stephen King film you ever saw. So I was having a good day, a bad day, good day, a bad day, good hour, bad hour. So I was staying up late at night, doing substance use to self-medicate, sleeping way in the next day, losing weight, stopped, it wasn't going to classes as much as I should. So I got through freshman year though, I got through, and I kind of did okay. I saw I was a good writer, and I felt like that's something I could do. And so I came back home, and I started, I had different types of symptoms. You may have heard these are very classic. I thought bugs were crawling on me. I thought food was being poisoned. I actually started having audio and visual hallucinations. I got hit pretty hard. So I was on my bed all summer, and it eventually got to where it was bad all the time. I had progressed far enough. I didn't have the good times. It was totally bad, which is kind of the way it worked for me. I've heard that's pretty common too. But I went down, my brother and I had a cry on our back porch, and we take me down to the emergency room, and he says, we talked to him for like a half hour, and he says, would you go with the nurse? And I was so vulnerable, I didn't even ask why, I just followed. And me and my brother walked through the door, and we heard it locked behind, and we thought, oh man, this is real. So anyways, I was only there about a week, and still that's my only hospitalization. I had family that always supported me and never kicked me out and around, and they were always there for me. Good Midwestern Iowa family, I think. So I was out of hospital, and then, but this was 1979, and I'm pretty sick, and the only medication back then was Haldol. So this was 79, and Haldol had been created like 1960. Some of you know that. So it hadn't advanced at all, and it was just a horrible medication for me. So people looking at you from the outside, they think, oh yeah, he's doing pretty good, but on the inside, just an absolute wreck. So anyways, fast forward, I saw several psychiatrists. I just muddled through. I saw Rick Larson finally, and Rick took a very aggressive form of recovery with me. Tried several different meds, several different diagnoses, and he says, would you be interested in trying this new medication called clozapine? And I was like, I'll try anything. So I tried it, and like an hour later, 2 hours later, my nervousness was starting to go away. And after a week, my thinking cleared up. And I have faith, but to me, it was like a miracle. I couldn't believe it happened. I'd been sick for so long. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to not have those issues anymore. So anyways, for coping now, I mean, it's not perfect. I feel very fortunate and I do good, but it's not perfect. I'll have a bad couple hours. And what I do is I'll get off by myself, put on some soothing music, or watch a sporting game, or get into conversation, something to distract myself. My dad and I are playing a little backgammon, and we're competitive on that. So we're doing that too. So anyways, I struggled through. I was totally sick for 17 years, and now I'm like 20 years in recovery, and I'm like the most happiest guy that it could be to be able to come out the other side with this stuff. I would wish mental health on nobody. You don't want to have to go through this, but if you do, there are treatments and there's possibilities. And we say there's no such thing as a magic pill, but for me, it was a magic pill. So I was on the NAMI National Board of Directors. I trained support group people for 3 years nationally. I finished a book. I saw Michelle was out here. Hey, Michelle. And she's helping me write it down for me. So anyways, the book is about written. We'll get that thing out there. And the drawing I do is just like with magic markers. I do different stuff. I think we might try to put a calendar together there. And I do some speaking too on my own story and stuff. So anyways, that's kind of the story of Steve in a short platform. And I feel free to answer any questions or anything you might have. So, okay.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. I think as a follow-up from some of our other panelists, I'm wondering, what are some of the signs people should be looking for? I think Dr. Donovan from a medical perspective, as well as, Brian and Adrian, in terms of just a community or church perspective, what are some signs that some of us could be looking for or pay attention to that someone might be struggling?
And it's interesting because, you hear religious grandiosity, and that can happen. And I was like that for not long, like a month. But a pastor can see that. He thinks they're really gung-ho for the Lord, but actually it's not a healthy situation. And so things I notice, I can tell if somebody's hearing voices, you can tell them talking. Engaging can be a problem. Trying to think what else. When you do come in touch with people that you think might have mental health issues, it's important to stay calm and try to reason and understand where the person is coming from. So it's a pretty touchy area. I'd be interested to hear what the pastor says. But it happens. And yeah, my diagnosis actually is schizoaffective. So I got hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
My nuclear family didn't get hit, just me. So.
All right. Thanks for sharing that, Steve. Brian or Dr. Donovan? Go ahead, Dr. Donovan.
I think some of the things Steve really pointed to in his story, he wasn't as interested in doing the things that he was normally interested in doing. Sports weren't as important to him. And, he wasn't doing as well in school as he, thought he could be doing. And, when his symptoms first started to talking about, I think you said you spent the whole summer in your bed. And those are all kind of, no matter what the mental health diagnosis is, those are some things that you often will see is that people will be not as interested in doing the things they used to do, spending more time in bed, or the flip side, not being able to sleep, so sleeping too much or sleeping too little, having appetite changes. And I think kind of, if you're not able to find the joy in the things that used to really bring you joy, that's definitely a symbol of people are starting to isolate. Like Steve kind of also talked about kind of being isolated in his room too. Those are all very common symptoms that he experienced, and a lot of people with different mental health diagnosis will experience.
And that's true. One of the things I noticed, I always had a good social life. I had lost contact with family and friends and colleagues. And when I got well, it was like having to start my whole life over to try to redo things. I didn't know what I wanted to do for my career, but in college and in high school. But I figured out that maybe I can help give people hope with mental health. So.
Thank you. Brian or Adrian, do you want to contribute to that question?
Sure. Yeah, I think, a previous life, I was a part of a crisis response team for 5 different school districts when they had different issues. And I remember one particular time we had a high school where a young kid died in football practice. And one of the pieces that became very obvious is none of the coaches were willing to go and talk to anyone. And you watched, that they didn't need it, they were fine. And the amount of alcoholism and other things that came. So sometimes there are other people that are going to see things in us that we don't. And we need to be open to that others' perspectives. I would say on the story side too, the other issue is always watching our sleep. It was a story with us for our son, and we were walking through things, just realizing it in his adolescence, he was sleeping about 2 to 3 hours a night. And that doesn't work real well. And all the other dynamics that kind of came into play. And so listening to other people, watching those things, I think is just critical that we keep encouraging each other.
when I was sick, I was sleeping like 12 hours a day. And now I do about 9. And they may seem like a lot, but I do it all in one block. The meds are so strong that I take, I kind of use them as a sedative. I take them about a half hour before I go to bed. So then I sleep through the hard time of it. So by the morning, it's starting to clear up a little bit. So I kind of got a good system. But I know, I mean, I sleep 9 or sometimes I need 10, but it works. I mean, that's what works for me. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. I think this is a good segue, and the comment that someone made in the comment is a good segue to my next question for Brian. Sometimes family members and friends notice something, but we're not sure how to offer some help. So as a pastor leader, what do you say to create a community context where it's okay to ask for help and it's okay for people to listen and support without trying to fix it? Many of us are fixers. And how do you see spiritual first aid happening in and through our community?
Yeah, a lot of great questions there to try to wrestle with this. As family, when we walk through these things, it is tough. Like from a spiritual community culture, like it's in the intro, and we do try to create a culture where it's okay to not be okay, but you don't have to stay that way. Sometimes, and Steve, you alluded to it too, in the faith community, there's kind of like, if you're suffering, you don't have faith, that there's something wrong with your belief system if you're struggling. And the truth is, we all struggle. We all have brokenness. We all have issues. And to make that more of a reality, that's an openness, and to talk about it is important. But when it comes to home, it's a little trickier because we're with each other all the time. There's an emotional stuff that just happens with how we communicate with each other. You try to bring it up, and there's emotional baggage that happens. We're our real raw self the most when we're at home, and that can be really hard to make this something to talk about. I think of the story of Jesus in scriptures where he went to a place that's kind of called the pool, and it's an area where sick people would gather on a regular basis. And Jesus intentionally went into where people were in pain. And it is something that we have to ask ourselves: are we willing to go to where people's pain is? Are we comfortable to be in their pain? And that's a really important aspect. And then in that spot, Jesus asks us, it's a profound question. We know it now, but he asked the one gentleman, do you want to get well? And do you want to get well? Because there is a curiosity factor that all of us have to have when we're trying to help someone else. We have to get curious, because as soon as we come in to fix it, we're actually going to create more problems. And we've all been there with fighting back and forth at home, and you don't know what you're talking about, and the emotional baggage comes in. And I think the picture that I really like there, though, that we kind of see through Jesus's example there and on other times, is at home, we have to get curious when we're going to be talking about this. Let's find out what's happening, what's taking place. Don't come in with answers. And you also have to have a grounding in and of yourself to help someone else find help. If you're not comfortable, and I know it's kind of a crude term, but with somebody else's emotional vomit, we'll do that with our kids when they're growing up. We clean it up, we're doing it. But if someone's not healthy, we're going to experience that at home, and that's where we'll experience it the most. And how do we come alongside our family members and say, I'm okay with this, I'm stable, I'll help clean this up, because I know there's an illness here that we want to help find help with, and to help you and to connect with you. There's a patience factor, but there's a resilience. Just if somebody's got a heart issue, you're going to get them to the doctor. If you're realizing, hey, this is not normal behavior, we're not communicating the way we used to communicate, this level of this other things are different dynamics, let's get you to the right care. And it might take a little bit longer, but having that kind of grounding and a sense of peace in it is just a really important part. So yeah, there's a lot we can unpack and talk about, but that's kind of the initial thoughts, because it's tricky. If we're all honest, this is a really tricky part, to have that conversation at home with those that we care about. And I think that's why having healthy community around you is important. I'll wrap up this part of this. I went through pretty significant time in my life at one point a couple of years ago, but my wife was really good at just saying, you will not be isolated. I don't care if you sit with this group of people and you cry the whole time. they're your friends, they love you. Let's make sure that we're with people. And having friends that just came and sat with me, just let me be me, didn't expect anything of me, was vital. And not letting people do this alone and in isolation is really, we need each other.
Wow, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that, Brian. I wrote down, like, we have to be willing to sort of get in the space with people's pain. It's really, really profound and puts a mental image, gives me a mental image for that. So thank you for that. You know, as a follow-up to this, then, what do you think gets in the way of people asking for help, and how can we as friends and family members make a difference?
So to me, it's stigma is one of the main barriers. We need to get over that and just accept and not judge people on their mental health. People on this call are probably going to be pretty good at dealing with this situation, but it still is one of our big stumbling blocks and one we need to be aware of. So.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, because, how people know there's an illness or whatever, but even when you're working with teens and other people, that they go to get treatment, they're thinking they're crazy, all the bad terminology that most of us on this group know that people use. But just helping people walk through those conversations and addressing it. Oh, it's good. You're fine. We're just kind of downplaying that side of it, but just hey, if you have a cold, you have COVID, right? We're all dealing with those topics that we need to go see doctors right now. It's okay to get the help that you need. But you're right, Steve. I agree with that on the stigma piece is a significant part.
Yeah, and I would also add here, I'm excited to hear what the person or Adrian with Foundations 2 would say. I think that's one of the great resources we have in our community, is to have a crisis center where people can come out and meet you in person or over the phone or text or chat and kind of help get you plugged into those services. I think sometimes it's, I want to help, but I don't know how. And sometimes it's just, reaching out to an organization that's can help plug you into what's going to be the most helpful too.
I'd say even on the family side, just real quick, is, sometimes family can come and just take, hey, look, we're going to go for a walk and we're going to trade off weeks and we're going to do this daily. And the family members take different days. Just those simple little things that you can do with each other to say, no, you're not going to sit by yourself. You're not going to be isolated. It's time for our walk today. Those things are huge that really only family can do. Only family can jump in on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are all really great points and really great ideas. Something else to just kind of keep in mind or contribute. A lot of people think, I guess not a lot of people, but some people think that, recovery from a mental illness is this linear process. And a lot of times it's not a linear process for people. You have good days, you have bad days, you have days where you're going to struggle more than others. And so, as a family member or as a professional, just remembering that this is not going to be a linear process and that you really need to be able to meet people where they're at day by day. And so that does take a lot of patience, and it does take a lot of energy from a caregiver as well. And so it's really important that you as a caregiver, in whatever capacity, personal or professional, that you're taking care of yourself too, so that you're able to show up and have the patience and the dedication that you're going to need to support people.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Adrian. That's really important, because as family and loved ones, it's important that it's just like that analogy of putting your own oxygen mask on first, right? Be able to help someone, you have to be able to take care of yourself first. I think this is a really nice segue then into our question that I have for you, Adrian, is, just looking at our community that we have, what are some services that are out there that maybe sometimes people don't think about, but also if this is my first time and I'm experiencing some stress and anxiety that maybe I'm not used to, or I'm noticing that in a loved one, where do I start? Where do I go?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question. And there's one of the great things about Cedar Rapids. I'm not from here originally. And so I moved here in 2019. And one of the things that I've been so pleased about is just how many great resources are available in this community to people. One thing that I always like to encourage people to do if it's the first time that they're experiencing mental health symptoms is to get connected with their primary care provider. Primary care providers are sometimes overlooked, but just like you would go to your primary care provider if you had a cold or you had COVID or you had any other type of physical symptoms going on, I think that they're a really great starting place to meet with and talk with a little bit about your mental health as well. They can make referrals for counseling. They can make recommendations or prescribe medications for people to get started on. They can make referrals to psychiatry if that's necessary. And so I think it's a really overlooked resource that people don't always think of when they think of mental health, but I always encourage people to reach out and make those appointments. You can usually get in pretty quickly and you already have a relationship with that person. And so it can feel a little bit less intimidating to go to your doctor than maybe to reach out to other resources. Additionally, I always like to talk about the Warm Line. I think this is a really wonderful resource for somebody to reach out to. It's a non-crisis line, it's confidential, and it's staffed by people who have been through similar situations or journeys and are in recovery. And so they can really provide some great insight into what you might be feeling and some insight into, what worked for them or what their apprehensions were and how they kind of got over those things to be able to get the help that they needed. So I think that that's a really great opportunity for people as well. I also generally recommend NAMI. So the NAMI website here has a lot of different referral options available. They have a lot of really great information about mental health. They provide education groups. They also do virtual support groups. Right now with COVID, I know that all their groups are online. So they have 3 virtual support groups that I'm aware of. So a couple for individuals that are living with mental illness, and then also one for family support. So if you are a family member who's struggling or kind of new to this and wanting to be a good support, it's really great education and really concrete information about how to be an ally to individuals. I also like to talk about United Way 211, where you can call and get just a whole list of different referrals and resources that are available here in our community. So, I mean, they also do things like utility, rent assistance, food and clothing, but they also have a lot of referrals for different counseling programs, different centers that you can go to. And then as I am with Foundation 2, of course, I have to talk about our services just a little bit. So we do have our crisis line that's 24/7 that you can call and get connected with a crisis counselor. We also have text and chat available for people that prefer typing their thoughts instead of talking. And then we also have our mobile crisis services that are available in this area as well, where trained counselors can come and meet with you and provide on-site crisis stabilization services as well.
Thank you, Adrienne. We are, as you just shared with all of that information, we really are fortunate in this community to have all of those resources. But I would say especially Foundation 2. Not every community has crisis services like we have here. So that's just fabulous. For the rest of the group, and I'd like to hear from all of you, but I think I want to start with Steve. Like, what services have you found helpful, or what services do you find helpful from your own personal experience?
Like she said, NAMI is a good resource here in Cedar Rapids, and there are affiliates all around the state. There's one in Iowa City. Very helpful, good groups, very active and can help. So thank you for mentioning NAMI. Our local number is 319-221-1184, and we have someone check the phone regularly. We refer to Foundation 2 or to Abby, or we'll be at the Access Center coming up. We do a number of CIT trainings with police and sheriffs to help them when they're out seeing somebody that obviously is not well. So we have Club 520 drop-in down at Abbey Center. I believe it's every afternoon, 5 days a week. Iowa City, it's Our Place, right? Anybody know for sure? I think it's called Our Place. I think that's the drop-in center and recovery center in Iowa City. So that's good. Let's see, what else? Yeah, the support groups, like you said. The family support group is here twice a month. And you can get the directions and stuff from the number I gave you. And let's see what else is going on. Anybody else have any ideas that would just help?
How about Dr. Donovan, would you like to jump in?
I was just going to also say, I think some of our 520 things are limited right now with COVID. But I think that Abbey Center website may have some updates on when those things are up and going.
And I do know that Abby is doing meetings virtually or over the phone, right? And that's what I've done a couple of times. I don't have to go in a lot, but and that's we're trying to accommodate to help you the best we can. It's just we gotta get a vaccine.
Yeah, yep. So we at the Abbey Center, we have a few in-person visits, but most of our providers are seeing people either over telehealth or over telephone. So you don't even have to come into the office anymore.
I'll throw two. I do think it's important for some, if you have people of faith, you get in your church or support things. But one of the pieces I always remind people is usually most clergy are to mental health care what Jiffy Lube is to auto maintenance. Most of us are really good if we get our oil changed every 3,000 to 6,000 miles, whatever we need. But if you need an overhaul, that's not the person. Then you need to go to the next level. But sometimes in the beginning stages, hey, before it becomes a more significant issue, if it is medical, that's going to progress and you can find that. But to find somebody that you can talk to, that you're comfortable talking with, somebody that can come alongside, be a person of peace in your life in that time frame. Just finding that it's just important that you take those first steps, that you to talk to somebody.
So there's a question in the chat box, and I would open this up to any one of you who would like to answer it. What do you say, or how do I support someone who struggles with not having the face-to-face contact? I imagine there's a lot of people struggling with that right now.
Well, that's hard. I mean, like we're saying, telemedicine is one of our best ways to go right now. I'm not sure how else we can do it.
I think a lot of the primary care doctors are still doing face-to-face contact. And I know somebody already brought up kind of, meeting with your primary care doctor. At Abbey Center, I know we do have some people that are doing some face-to-face visits. There are at least 2 of us that are in the office most days of the week for those face-to-face visits, if that's what works best for someone. I think finding ways to connect with people that work for you and trying to be creative about it. Whether you're meeting through a glass window or something like that, you still have that face-to-face contact. There's someone in between you. There's a lot of different ways people can do it, and I think finding what's going to work for you and what's going to work for your family the best, and being creative. I think whether it's maybe doing a drive, like if it's you just need to see your family and doing a drive-by, or just driving past the house, or kind of pulling up and your family member stays 6 feet from the car and you stay in your car, and some different ways of doing that can be helpful too, just to have that somewhat physical contact. And then also kind of assessing what are the risks, and kind of what are the acceptable risks for you. If having a meaningful life means getting a hug from grandma, or for grandma to have a meaningful life, that means being able to give her a hug to her grandchildren. Are there ways that you can kind of safely mask and do that? Or is it maybe we kind of watch rates and see where things go? And that's going to be a different conversation for each family, and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for each family. But kind of realizing what's important to you in life and making arrangements for that.
I think also just talking with that person and letting them know that that's a really normal feeling, and that a lot of other people are struggling with that too, and that they're not alone in those feelings that they're having. I found that it's also helpful to remind people that this is temporary, and that it's not going to go on forever and ever. When you sign up to be unhappy, or when you have to make choices that sometimes are uncomfortable, it's nice to remember that there is an end to this. And I know that, sometimes there is still some anxiety because we don't know the exact end of when this is going to happen, but it will end and things will be able to kind of return to normal. And so reminding people of that too, that this isn't going to be forever, and that they can get through it.
Thank you, Adrienne. I think you're right. That's really important. Sometimes in the middle of all of this, it feels like it may not ever end, but but we will get to the other side of this, even though it feels like we may not. So we're getting close to the end of our time here. So I sort of want to wrap things up a little bit. And as we talked about here, early intervention is so important. And it's just important that everybody knows that they're not alone dealing with their mental health concerns. And so we've shared a lot of resources today. And, I encourage you all to, refer family and friends to those. And as we know, as our mothers may have said once, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So continue to be open and share with your share resources with your families and listen to your family and friends and watch for any changes in their behaviors. I want to take just a minute to remind people or share with people on how they can engage with Make It Okay. You can go to the makeitokay.org/Iowa website and you can sign the pledge to Make It Okay in your community. You can register your workplace also on the Make It Okay website. And if you do that, you will get a toolkit and resources on what you can do within your workplace to make it an okay place to work. And then you could also become an ambassador, a Make It Okay ambassador. There's a training, and I'm going to have to ask Jamie at the end of this. I know we have a training coming up very soon that you can register for to become a Make It Okay ambassador, where you can give presentations to your workplace, to your place of worship or other community organizations, and we would welcome you to become a Make It Okay ambassador.
Carol, I think there was a question from Laura in the chat.
Oh, thank you. I missed it. Okay, earlier it was mentioned that families are essential support systems for someone with mental health issues. I totally agree, but sometimes there are multiple people in one family with mental health issues, which complicates things. Any suggestions for ways that families with multiple issues, with multiple people, to bolster their support system? Wow, what a great question. Does anybody want to tackle that first?
I can take a stab at it. It's definitely a very complicated situation for sure. I would definitely recommend, it is so important to have the support of your family, but I think it's also important to remember what your boundaries are. And so if you are a person that is struggling with your mental health, it's okay to say, I care about you and I want to support you, but right now I'm not in a place where I'm able to do that, or I'm not in a place right now where I'm the best person to help you. Let's try to think of some other suggestions or some other people that you can reach out to, to provide the support during this time. I think it's also important to check in with yourself if you are a person with a mental health diagnosis who's supporting somebody else with their mental health challenges, to make sure that you're doing okay. And that some of their experiences aren't triggering you or bringing up emotions or feelings in you that you need to take care of and you need to address as well.
I feel like Adrian hit it right on, just key in that. That is really good, because it is about helping understand boundaries in this and helping that connection take place. And I think too, the other piece is putting as much support network around you as possible. And sometimes, and don't feel like the people that are supporting you have to be a one size fits all. Maybe you need to get people that support you in helping you with groceries, or people that help you with different areas. Find the area they can. Don't expect one person to come alongside and do everything. We too often put too much on one person, and having those boundaries is important. It is tough. I know we're going through some things, and even looking for resources as a parent who has a kid struggling. What are the resources?
I'm gonna step in, I guess, and when
go ahead.
back, I will let him finish his thoughts there. But the other thing I would say is, we talked about families, but there's the families you're born into and the families you choose, and not limiting those experiences just to people who are biologically related to you. A lot of times there may be trauma or violence in those relationships, and we don't want to put people in situations where they're unsafe, but realizing that there are people in your life that may not be biologically related to, but maybe just as close as family, and reaching out to them. I think the other thing too is to be able to share stories and say, like if it's not every family talks about mental health issues, not every family feels comfortable with that. And if you see somebody else struggling, if you're comfortable sharing your story, or if you don't have your own story, kind of sharing, a story of a loved one that maybe struggled and how they got through it. Sometimes that can be very meaningful and powerful.
I think it's very important too. I mean, you're a primary caregiver and there can be a lot of stress on you, but take time for yourself too.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. That's really important as well. I agree. There's another question in here for you, Dr. Donovan. How do you help residents who are in primary care training, and how do you best support how to best support their patients with mental illness?
Yeah, so I used to work for the Cedar Rapids Medical Education Foundation. That was a family medicine residency program here in Cedar Rapids. We officially closed our doors on June 30th of this year, so I'm not directly involved with resident care at this moment. That's actually kind of interesting that I'm helping out with a lecture at a different residency program this afternoon. But I think part of it is kind of getting back to that stigma, but also like people are sometimes afraid of people with mental health issues, and it's because they don't know what to say, don't know what to expect. And I think, just having residents have exposures to clients that have more severe and persistent mental illness, that maybe have less severe and persistent mental illness, and kind of the variations between those, and kind of figuring out what's helpful, what's not helpful, and how to set appropriate boundaries so you're not oversharing, you're not undersharing, you're feeling comfortable. Like within resident education, there are opportunities for family medicine residents to do psychiatric or mental health rotations. So I would say for people that have mental health conditions, like if you are at a doctor's office and they say, hey, we have a learner, whether it's a medical student or a resident or a nursing student, or wherever that learner is in the process, like allowing them to sit in on your visit if you have a mental health condition, and maybe just talk about like what's been helpful for you in your mental health care. How's your doctor helped you? How's your doctor not helped you? Or maybe you've seen doctors in the past that were less than helpful. Kind of just sharing your experiences with the learners as they're coming through the medical education system. Does that answer?
I think that's a really nice answer, Dr. Donovan. And I think we see that in the hospital too. There's many nurses who think they're not comfortable with working with patients with mental illness, but oftentimes it's just because they haven't had enough exposure, or they just need more education and more knowledge. And usually that comfort level comes along. Jamie, do you want to jump in and talk about the next ambassador? There's somebody asking when that is.
Yeah, the next one actually is tomorrow. And so in the email, you will receive a link to that if you're interested. It is tomorrow from 1 to 3. We host that via Zoom. And we are working on the rest of the schedule for 2021. So you will be notified on our email list when those become available.
Excellent. I see Brian made it back on the call. Did you want to finish your thought at all before we wrap things up? Or?
No, I'm sure you all got it. It's
all right. All right. Thank you all. I really want to thank everybody for participating in this call today. All of us working together, we certainly can help reduce the stigma in our community and work towards making it okay to not be okay.